Have you ever wondered what someone would do for the promise of unimaginable wealth? It's a question that gnaws at the edges of trust, prying apart the layers of what we hope and what we fear. To the outsider, Emily's world looked serene. A beautiful home, a loving marriage, the patter of a shared life echoing through softly lit rooms. But behind the gentle facade, a storm had begun to simmer, a test of love spun from secrets and sprawling ambition. Today, Emily was wide awake to every micro shift in her reality. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? On a seemingly ordinary morning, as sunlight crept along the hardwood, Emily exhaled into the silent space between sleep and wakefulness. The pillow beside her was already cold. Ryan had left for work, leaving only a faint trace of cologne intertwined with the crisp bedsheets, a scent that didn't belong to either of them. That fragrance, subtle but unmistakably foreign, pulled her from dreamy reverie into bracing clarity. Was it new cologne? Or a ghostly residue from an encounter she hadn't witnessed? Uncertainty pressed in on her chest. There were other shadows lingering too. 2 days before, she had allowed something extraordinary to sit in plain view. A set of inheritance documents, forged by her careful hand, suggesting that a $500 million windfall had landed at her feet. A clever ruse. She watched its effect ripple through Ryan as if she had uncorked a secret elixir. At first, his behavior shifted so subtly, she wondered if it was her imagination. His touches became warmer, his smiles a little more dazzling, his laughter echoing with practiced exuberance. He addressed her with endearments, babe, love, peppered into conversation like sugar, as if trying to sweeten the air she breathed. But beneath those gestures lurked something sharper, a spark of restlessness in his gaze, a glimmer as cold and dangerous as a poker player with aces in the hole. It was on a Thursday evening, as the city melted into dusk, that the first signs of undeniable change revealed themselves. Ryan returned home not in his usual jeans and work shirt, but wearing a tailored suit, an ensemble reserved for once-in-a-decade weddings or farewells to people no longer among the living. He tossed his briefcase onto an armchair, the subtle clink of glass echoing as he loosened his expensive silk tie. "You look sharp," Emily remarked, keeping her tone breezy, stirring pasta as aromatic steam curled around them. His answer was nonchalant, the kind of half-truth people sell themselves. Meeting ran late. Mike and Ava wanted to go over some details. He kissed her cheek, then poured a generous drink, the liquid sunlight glinting in his glass. She played along, her voice dripping with casual curiosity. Details? About what? Ryan, as if eager to brandish his ambitions, leaned in, voice low with excitement. Our next move. We have a property lined up, a rare find, prime location. With our resources, We could close before anyone else. The profits could be massive. His mouth curved into that wide, persuasive grin she remembered falling for. Smooth as silk sheets. She tasted the word carefully. My resources? Babe, our resources. This is what people spend their lives chasing. His confidence was intoxicating, but Emily, setting the pasta on simmer, replied, People also dream about not losing everything they have. Her words, soft as velvet, left a sting. He almost laughed, eyes flickering defensively. You think I'd let that happen? Still, she pressed gently. I think people do strange things when they feel like they've just hit the jackpot. For a split second, his smile faltered, a flicker of the mask slipping, before his easy demeanor returned. You're overthinking again, he reassured, but they both knew she wasn't. That night, beneath the gentle hum of the city, Emily texted Daniel. He's pushing. We might get something soon. Daniel's reply came fast and certain. Stay calm. Let him reveal himself. On Saturday, Ryan suggested a cozy brunch. The cafe buzzed with weekend chatter, sunlight dappling across polished tables. Emily agreed, noting how his attention flickered repeatedly to his phone, as if waiting for an invisible hand to tip the scales. When the device buzzed, he excused himself, stepping outside. Through the glass, she watched him, shoulders hunched, voice animated, always slightly out of reach, even in broad daylight. When he returned, his face was smooth, his smile as practiced as an actor's. Who was that? Emily asked, slicing into her pancakes. Mike, Ryan replied smoothly. Just confirming the property's still on the market. Perfect timing, right? But Emily's mind worked quietly, gathering threads that didn't add up. Later that day, bent on uncovering the full truth, she found a folder tucked inconspicuously beneath the couch cushions. Inside, printouts of property listings, hastily drawn sketches, bullet points in Ryan's unmistakable script, her name circled in bold. Emily, front capital. Each phrase was an arrow through the trust she had once given him so freely. She put the folder back in its hiding place, letting the weight of what she had seen settle in her bones. The next day, while Ryan claimed to be meeting Mike, Emily invited Claire over, a friend whose support came without reservation. Emily showed her the folder. Claire's lips tightened. He's not even being subtle about it. Emily nodded. That's the part that scares me. Overconfidence breeds mistakes. Claire placed a steadying hand over Emily's. Promise me you'll get evidence. Don't just walk away. Oh, I'll catch him, Emily promised, voice iron strong beneath the softness. But I want him to believe victory's already his, until the very final minute. That Sunday night, Ryan came home vibrantly perfumed, not just with ambition, but the unmistakable floral notes of Ava's signature scent, another invisible thread woven into the unraveling tapestry. Emily, ever composed, greeted him with a glass of good wine and a sphinx's smile. So, how was the meeting? She inquired. Ryan's eyes glittered with expectation. They're ready, Em. All we need is your signature to set everything in motion. The following morning, Emily feigned compliance, serving coffee as the winter sun cut silvery stripes across their kitchen table. "If we're doing this," she declared evenly, "I need full disclosure. Every detail, contracts, where every dollar flows, everything." He was quick to reassure her. "Absolutely. Ava will send over the paperwork." She delivered her stipulation clearly. "And my lawyer will review it." He tensed, if only for a second, a micro-expression quickly masked with a forced smile. "If that's what makes you feel comfortable, sure." But discomfort was exactly what Emily wanted. His uncertainty, her silent ally. Within 48 hours, Ava herself arrived with a stack of dense documents, her smile slicing through the air. All friendly disguise, but devoid of warmth. "Ryan tells me you're sharp," Ava purred. Emily returned the sentiment, her courtesy tightly controlled. "I do my best." The paperwork was a labyrinth designed for the unwary, fine print swirling like a riptide towards a hidden trap. Deep in the legalese, a clause would have parted Emily from control of the assets, handing power to a company fronted by Ava. That night, under uneven lamplight, Emily read every line twice, her thoughts sharpening with every word she absorbed. By Thursday, the plan was set. Daniel, ever the loyal strategist, helped her prepare a decoy, a contract that looked at first blush like authorization to move her inheritance into Ryan's grasp. But the truth was far more cunning. In signing, Ryan would unwittingly surrender ownership of every account and asset he had ever claimed as his. Irrefutable evidence of his intent to defraud. On Friday, with practiced calm, Emily presented the document. Ryan, giddy and blinded by hope, didn't so much as scan the first page. He signed in a flourish, convinced he was sealing their golden future. "You'll thank me for this one day," he assured, pressing his lips to her hand. Her smile was smooth as glass. "I'm sure I will." By dusk, all was in motion. Daniel waited a discreet distance down the street, a police contact by his side. At Emily's signal, she invited Ryan into the kitchen. "Come, sit, let's toast to what's ahead." He poured himself an extravagant measure of whiskey, toasting to our future. Then, 3 loud knocks echoed through the hall. Ryan's brow knitted as he opened the door to find Daniel and an officer on the step. "What's going on?" Ryan barked, but Emily remained steady in her chair. "This is my thank you, Ryan," she said, "for letting me see who you truly are." The officer stepped forward, voice unwavering. "Mr. Cole, you need to come with us. We have documents, statements and witness accounts. Fraudulent solicitation." Ryan stared, accusation and betrayal skirmishing in his eyes. "You set me up!" She met his gaze, her calm, unflinching. "No, Ryan. You set yourself up. I just made sure the right people were watching." As Ryan was led away, the house felt suddenly cavernous, as if the hollowness he had left behind was the exhale of someone who had been holding their breath far too long. Emily watched him go through the frost-patterned window, her hands steady but her heart pounding in her chest, the adrenaline mingling with a dawning sense of relief that felt as fragile as spun sugar. In those moments that stretched and contracted with the ticking of the hallway clock, she let herself finally feel everything. Anger, sorrow, even a measure of pity for the man she once trusted. Claire arrived soon after, wordlessly gathering Emily into a hug. "It's over," Claire whispered, "and you did what you had to." Emily nodded, burying her face into Claire's shoulder for just a heartbeat. But even as the embrace warmed her, Emily knew closure wouldn't come so easily. The realization that trust, once fractured, could never be restored to its original shape lingered like a chill in her bones. Later that evening, the house felt unmoored, every room echoing with half-memories. The sound of Ryan's laughter, the familiar arguing over trivialities, the quiet moments of shared joy from before. But Emily was different now. Her resolve had been tempered in the fire of betrayal. She wandered from room to room, letting herself say goodbye to the illusions she'd once held dear. The pain was sharp, but clarity shimmered just behind it, an invitation to reclaim her life on her own terms. By nightfall, Emily found herself on the veranda, staring into the inky dusk, phone in hand. She dialed her lawyer, voice composed and clear. "I'll be forwarding all correspondence," she said, "including the decoy documents, his proposals, and the evidence of forged signatures." The lawyer's reassurance was brisk and professional, wrapping Emily in another layer of protection. Step by step, she was reclaiming her power, a mosaic being rebuilt from the wreckage. The weekend crept in heavy and slow, bringing with it calls from friends and whispers from neighbors. News, as always, had traveled swiftly. Ryan Cole's arrest was already being dissected by the local rumor mill. Some called offering sympathy. Others, driven by morbid curiosity, rehearsed their questions as though Emily were the lead in a scandalous play. Emily learned quickly which voices soothed versus which ones itched for gossip. She leaned into the comfort of those few who mattered most. Claire, Daniel, her mother, who phoned from 3 time zones away, each voice a lifeline tethering her to gentler realities. "You don't have to explain yourself to anyone," Claire insisted during a late-night chat. "You were protecting your heart, your future." Still, Emily found her mind wandering back to the sequence of events, the way suspicion had crept in, the thrill of setting her trap, the absolutely gutting realization that her worst hypothesis had been correct. Each memory surfaced with a jolt, her emotional landscape crashing between vindication and grief. Was there something I missed? She questioned herself again and again. Was there a clue I failed to see? A moment when I could have turned back? But somewhere deeper, she recognized this spiral of regret for what it was, a way to avoid the finality of loss. She looked in the mirror, observing shadows under her eyes and lines that hadn't been there before. Reminders of the invisible cost of relentless vigilance. In this fragile stretch of aftermath, Emily made a resolve. She wouldn't let this betrayal define her, nor would she allow it to corrode her trust in others or herself. Days trickled by, and with them, layers of Ryan's deception peeled away in the light of legal discovery. The more Emily learned, the clearer his motivation became. Not just greed for riches, but a hunger for validation, approval, even admiration from peers like Ava and Mike. He'd been lost, it seemed, not simply in schemes, but in the need to play the part of a financial mastermind. Someone bigger, louder, more important than who he truly was beneath. Emily met with Daniel at a quaint, nearly deserted cafe. Over steaming mugs of coffee, Daniel placed a thick folder on the table. The investigation is ongoing, but it's clear Ryan didn't act alone. Ava's connections run deep. There are other victims. Emily felt a wave of sorrow, unexpectedly gentle. They all believed in him, too, she murmured, tracing a finger around her cup. Daniel nodded, his expression pained. People like Ryan and Ava, they thrive on trust. They know how to mimic sincerity for as long as it benefits them. But they can't sustain it forever. This conversation, quietly intense, forced Emily to confront uncomfortable questions about the limits of empathy, the difference between weakness and vulnerability. Was Ryan always destined to cross that line, or had a single bad decision snowballed into catastrophe? She would never know, but in the silent aftermath, she chose to forgive herself, if not for believing in him, then for holding on to hope until the very end. Within a week, Emily felt the old house shifting under her touch, the rooms less haunted by sadness and more invigorated by possibility. She sorted through files, cleared closets pair by pair, folding away not only clothing, but the assumptions she had once worn so easily. Each box she taped shut was a chapter closed. Memories gently filed under lessons learned, rather than weights to be endured. Claire came over with paint samples, brushes, and a bucket of optimism. Maybe it's time for color. Claire grinned, holding swatches up to the kitchen light. The afternoon passed in laughter, paint smudges marking the story of renewal across their faces and arms. Every stroke felt like a reclaiming, not just of the space, but of the future they imagined for each other. "You're stronger than you know," Claire whispered, as if painting those words into the violet accent wall they'd chosen together. As Emily peeled painter's tape from the corners, she recognized something shifting on a cellular level. She no longer associated the creak of the stairs or the echo in the hallway with Ryan, but with herself, the woman who had tricked a trickster, who had chosen not to crumble, but to rise. The world, for the first time in months, seemed wide open and inviting. a palette of possibility waiting for her to choose the next color. Not long after, Emily received a letter marked from the county jail. The handwriting was jagged, familiar, desperate. It was from Ryan. Her heart quickened as she hesitated, envelope in hand. For minutes that felt like hours, she stared into space, imagining the contents, the apologies, the justifications, the pleas. Finally, she opened it. The letter spanned 3 scrawled pages, a winding mixture of regret and anger, attempts to explain, to blame, to reach her in the same ways that used to work. "I never meant it to go so far," he wrote. "You were always stronger than me, Em." Maybe if things were different, so would I. Emily read and reread, letting the words settle without letting them take root. When she was ready, she penned a single line for her reply. "We are accountable for our choices, not our circumstances. I hope you find clarity." She dropped it in the mailbox, feeling lighter than she had in months. Closure, she realized, wasn't about erasing the past, but refusing to let it dictate her future. She walked home on streets lit by the waning sun, a sense of peace anchoring her in ways she hadn't thought possible. Whatever came next, it would be on her terms and hers alone. In the weeks that followed, Emily's life was marked not just by her own healing, but by the ripples her ordeal sent through her neighborhood and professional circles. The story of Ryan's arrest, the cleverness of Emily's trap, and the involvement of Ava and Mike circulated in hushed voices wherever she went. Some faces betrayed support, some glinted with envy or schadenfreude. She became unwittingly infamous, the woman who outsmarted a swindler, whose true grit had shattered a seemingly unbreakable facade. Emily quickly learned how exhausting public attention could be. At her workplace, some colleagues tiptoed around her, offering muted sympathy, while others leaned in, seeking details she knew would only serve as fodder for gossip. There were subtle changes in how people treated her. She was simultaneously admired and held at arm's length. Even in grocery aisles, she felt the weight of glances and overheard snatches of conversation. Her private life, now strangely communal. Yet amid the discomfort, Emily discovered allies. Her manager, who quietly reshuffled her schedule to shield her from prying coworkers. The barista at her favorite coffee shop, who started saving her favorite pastry for mornings when she looked tired. The elderly neighbor, who left a single violet on her porch, a wordless sign-off. Solidarity. These small kindnesses became her anchor, helping her remember she was more than the sum of her suffering. One afternoon, Emily sat with Daniel in a park dotted with golden autumn leaves. "You know people will eventually move on," he reminded her, offering a reassuring smile. "They'll turn their attention to the next news flash, the next drama." Emily breathed in the crisp air, feeling the truth of his words. "I hope I can too," she replied. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. You already have. Emily felt her internal walls shifting, becoming less like fortresses and more like lattices, structures that could support but also let in light. She began attending a local support group for those whose trust had been exploited, walking through the doors with both apprehension and hope. Here were people who looked ordinary but carried invisible wounds. In shared stories, she found unexpected resonances and comfort. Sitting in the circle, Emily heard tales of manipulation, heartache, resilience, and redemption. The room pulsed with raw honesty, absence of pretense, the currency of survival after betrayal. Sometimes the stories made her ache with remembrance, but more often, they allowed her to lay down the burden of isolation, replacing it with a feeling of belonging. In the group, she met Malaika, a soft-spoken woman from Ethiopia whose own ordeal mirrored Emily's in uncanny ways. They gravitated toward each other, sharing coffee after meetings, exchanging stories and voices that trembled, then steadied. Malaika encouraged Emily to see her experience not just as tragedy, but as catalyst, an entryway into greater self-awareness and empathy. Together, they walked along the riverside after one session, the world painted in sunset hues. Pain transforms us, Malaika observed, but friendship helps put us back together. Emily smiled, realizing that her vulnerability was not a weakness, but a connection point. In the space created by honesty and support, she felt herself growing stronger, more self-assured. With the storm behind her, Emily felt the gentle urge to rediscover the things that had once brought her joy, the passions relegated to the background in the struggle against betrayal. She returned to her weekend pottery classes, fingers kneading cool clay, shaping vessels that held not just water, but the contours of her new life. Each piece reflected both her pain and her resilience, as she molded beauty from raw, unformed material. The teacher, a patient woman named Celeste, recognized Emily's return not just as a student, but as someone seeking renewal. There's power in creation, Celeste mused, watching Emily work. You can always make something new from what's broken. Emily smiled, her hands caked in earthy grays and blues. The rhythm of the wheel soothed her, an act of meditation that slowly helped stitch together the fabric of her soul. She made gifts for friends, delicate bowls in vibrant glazes, small sculptures that held quiet meanings. Claire received a turquoise vase, inscribed subtly with the word hope. Daniel's piece was sturdier, glazed in forest green, with the iron-willed phrase, "Trust again," etched into its base. In the act of creating, Emily started to see herself anew, not the victim or the woman in headlines, but as an artist, a giver, a person fundamentally changed but not undone. Her regained sense of identity was as tangible as the pottery she fired, and she found reassurance in the possibility of endless renewal. Over time, Emily's relationships evolved, shaped by the ordeal but nourished by resilience and truth. With Claire, the friendship deepened, bonded not just through laughter and mutual support, but now a tested loyalty that felt unbreakable. "You walked the road with me," Emily told her one evening, sharing tea on her porch. "I'll never forget that." Claire smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "We survived together, Em. That's how we win." Emily felt herself opening again to new friendships, even daring to trust in new ways. With Malaika, she formed a book club that soon drew in neighbors and acquaintances, a quiet celebration of life's possibilities. Discussions ranged from heartbreak to healing, stories interwoven with wisdom and humor. Through these gatherings, Emily felt her narrative reshaping, not as a cautionary tale, but as an example of growth after adversity. Ava and Mike's fates were still being decided in the courts, their schemes coming to light in brisk hearings and media reports. Emily followed the updates, not out of spite, but from a sense of completion, wanting closure, not revenge. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by, bringing news of the final verdicts. "It's over," he said softly. Justice was done. Emily felt a bittersweet pang. Relief, yes, but also an abiding wish that people might learn, change, find redemption. In response to Daniel's steady presence, she admitted, "What matters most is that I move forward. I refuse to let anger settle in my heart." Spring arrived, gentle and awakening. Emily stood in her repainted kitchen, now flooded with morning light, as the world outside blossomed, reminding her that cycles of hardship and rebirth are as natural as the turning of the seasons. She brewed tea at her newly set table, savoring the small rituals that marked her independence and renewal. Life wasn't perfect. Scars did not vanish overnight. Yet Emily noticed subtle differences, a sense of softness where anxiety had once ruled, a kind of spaciousness, as if her heart had learned how to stretch beyond what once held her captive. She found joy in quiet mornings with books, in pottery classes that now felt celebratory, in simple dinners with Claire, Malaika, and Daniel, whose laughter created new memories where shadows once lingered. Looking ahead, Emily felt excitement blossom, a genuine hope for what might come. She made plans to travel, to give back to her support group through mentorship, to continue creating art that spoke to resilience. She understood, in her bones, that the greatest inheritance she could ever claim was not money, but wisdom, not possessions, but the gift of a spirit unbroken. Standing in her sunlit kitchen, Emily allowed herself a smile, one that radiated not just forgiveness, but the kind of happiness that is earned, deeply felt, and fiercely protected. Her story was hers again, and she was ready for all the chapters yet unwritten. In the tranquil hush of early summer morning, Emily settled into her favorite chair, journal in hand, ready to sift through the memories and lessons that had shaped her recent months. She'd grown accustomed to this ritual, a deliberate pause to observe her internal landscape, to celebrate her victories and gently address lingering wounds. The act of writing felt healing, a form of self-dialogue that grounded her as surely as the roots of the old oak outside her window. Her entries flowed from the heart. Observations on trust, reflections on self-worth, and the hard-won understanding that intuition deserved to be honored. Emily found herself marveling at the signs she'd once ignored, at the courage that surfaced when she needed it most. She wrote, "Pain is a teacher. Betrayal is a warning. But acceptance is the bridge back to life." These words spilled onto the page, an echo of her journey and a guide for the days that lay ahead. Sometimes she revisited the moments when hope had almost betrayed her, when she clung to love in the face of mounting evidence that the love she'd known was changing. But in those reflections, there was no bitterness, only gratitude for the wisdom she'd gained. She recalled the night of the confrontation, the trembling resolve in her hands, and how her voice had steadied the moment she stood for herself. By dedicating intentional space for remembrance, Emily found closure. Her story was not one of perpetual victimhood, but of rising, a process revealed through daily choices, acts of kindness, and moments of courage. The power to reclaim joy, to find love and meaning again, belonged to her and her alone. Days stretched into weeks, and before long, Emily realized that her own transformation bore the power to inspire others. She began volunteering at her support group, offering wisdom not as a superior, but as a fellow traveler. She shared stories, answered questions, and extended the grace she wished she'd found earlier in her own journey. Emily's approach was simple: honesty without sensationalism, validation without judgment. She encouraged participants to trust the strength of their own instincts, reminding them, "You are the expert of your experience, and your resilience is more valuable than any apology." Through guided conversations, she helped members recognize the patterns of manipulation, subtle cues, gaslighting techniques, strategies for self-protection. The group flourished under her light. People came, some shy, some angry, others grieving. Emily's care and empathy wrapped around them, a safe haven that allowed vulnerability to become the seed of growth. She coordinated workshops with Malaika, including creative sessions, pottery, painting, poetry, where trauma could be expressed and released in tangible form. One evening, after a particularly moving seminar, a younger woman approached Emily. "You gave me hope," she whispered. "I thought I'd never feel strong again." Emily smiled, sensing the ripple effect her journey had sparked. "Strength comes from survival, but healing is what makes us whole," she replied. In those moments of connection, Emily felt her story extend beyond herself, nurturing a community bound not by pain, but by the promise of renewal. On a rainy Saturday, as Emily browsed the shelves of a bookstore, she heard a voice behind her, soft, familiar, hesitant. She turned and found herself facing Mike, whose involvement with Ryan and Ava had once threatened everything she held dear. Time had etched humility into his features. His posture was no longer arrogant, but searching. "Emily," he began, uncertainty plain, "I don't expect forgiveness. But I do. I do want to say I'm sorry, for my part in it all." The words seemed fragile, foreign, tumbling from someone who had at last recognized their own brokenness. She listened, heart steady. "Apology matters, but what matters more is learning," Emily replied. Mike nodded, swallowing hard. "You deserved better than what we gave." He admitted his complicity, his regret, and spoke of the ongoing process to rebuild his own life. Their conversation was brief but transformative, a testament to the complexity of human failure and the possibility of growth. Lessons bloom. Emily felt compassion stirring, not absolution, but a release of anger that had tethered her to the past. As she departed, she wished Mike well, knowing that her own healing required neither vengeance nor enmity. The rain washed away remnants of old resentments as Emily stepped onto the street, and for the first time she understood that forgiveness was not passive acceptance of harm. It was the courage to let go, to break the chains of bitterness, and create more space for joy. As summer deepened, Emily and her friends organized a small garden celebration, marking the anniversary of her newfound freedom and growth. The evening was intimate, a mosaic of laughter, heartfelt toasts, and the sharing of dishes from their many cultures. Claire brought Irish bread. Malika prepared Ethiopian coffee. Daniel brought Italian pastries. And Emily served fragrant herbal teas brewed from her own garden. Amid the shimmering lights hung on branches and the rich scent of blooming jasmine, Emily felt surrounded by the warmth of true belonging. Music played softly. Stories were swapped, some funny, some profound, all poignant in their own way. Lessons bloom. The air carried the hum of healing, friendship, and the vibrant possibility of what life might bring next. At the night's end, Emily stood to speak, her voice ringing with quiet confidence. Our lives are shaped not only by what we endure, but by how we choose to respond, and by the love we allow ourselves to receive. What was once broken can be transformed by courage, and by those who walk beside us when we falter. Her words resonated, a benediction for her gathered friends and herself, a declaration of hope made visible. The celebration was more than a party. It was sacrament, a ritual of letting go of pain, of honoring growth, and of welcoming the future. When the dawn broke after the celebration, Emily sat in the quiet of her garden, watching petals open to the sun. She reflected on the tapestry of her story, woven from heartache, betrayal, resilience, forgiveness, and radiant hope. Each thread, even the painful ones, contributed to the richness of her life. She realized that while her experiences had tested her, they had also awakened parts of her that she had not known existed. A deep capacity for empathy, for leadership, for joy. Emily envisioned the road ahead not as a straight path, but as a landscape of possibility, unpredictable, sometimes challenging, but fundamentally open. She felt prepared to embrace new adventures, to travel, to deepen her artistry, to love and be loved with wisdom unclouded by fear. Her journey had taught her that the true measure of wealth could not be found in inheritance or possessions, but in courage, self-awareness, and human connection. As the sun climbed higher, she closed her journal and stood, feeling the gentle certainty of belonging to herself and to the world she shaped with her choices. With each step she took back into her home, Emily carried the promise of her own strength, a story not of victimhood, but of transformation. She was ready, finally, for whatever came next.